Hey guys, tonight we are slipping quietly into the stone chambers of a medieval palace, where a royal woman stirs awake beneath heavy wool blankets. The air is damp and cold, the kind of cold that makes you hesitate before putting your feet on the floor. You hear the faint crackle of last night's embers still clinging to life in the hearth, and you imagine the draft that sneaks under the door. This was no fairy tale awakening with birds singing on the windowsill. It was more like hoping your chamber pot didn't freeze solid overnight. You probably wouldn't survive this part, unless you really enjoy ice-cold teas first thing in the morning. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love for you to comment below where you're watching from, and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey. Together. You stretch, reluctant to leave the cocoon of blankets, but duty calls. A royal woman doesn't rise alone. Her chambermaids slip in quietly, carrying linens, combs, and sometimes even a candle stub if the morning is particularly dark. They pull open the shutters, letting in a gray dawn, and you feel the bite of the air against your skin. You sit upright, adjusting the wool night shift you slept in, and glance toward the hearth. The maid kneels to stir the ashes, coaxing flame back to life, because no royal lady begins her day without at least a little warmth. The stone floor feels cruelly cold, even through your slippers. A carved chest near your bed holds garments for the day: kameez, gown, and a surcoat if the weather demands. The layering begins, each piece of clothing pulled on with the quiet help of attendants. You stand tall as they tie laces and smooth wrinkles, the ritual almost ceremonial in its precision. Historians still argue whether noble women truly wore their heaviest dresses daily, or saved them for occasions, but in these mornings, you often chose warmth over elegance. The chamber itself is both sanctuary and stage. Tapestries hang on the walls not just for beauty, but to block drafts. A carved crucifix sits above the bed, reminding you that the day should begin not with comfort, but with prayer. Yet you can't help but notice how the candlelight flickers across the embroidery of saints and flowers, glowing like a private gallery. There are quirks to this routine that never make it into the chronicles. Sometimes, your favorite lapdog, small enough to fit in the crook of your arm, wriggles from beneath the blankets, demanding attention. Sometimes a maid trips and drops a slipper, and the whole room shares a stifled laugh. And sometimes, you wake to the sound of the castle rooster crowing far too early, convinced he's in league with your confessor to keep you pious and punctual. Yet for all its small discomforts, this waking ritual sets the tone. You feel the weight of being seen, even if only by a handful of servants, because every gesture is practice for the greater performance of the day ahead. In a world where a queen or princess embodied the dignity of her house, even the act of pulling on a gown at dawn was part of her duty. Outside, the courtyard stirs with sounds of guards changing watch and grooms leading horses. Inside, you sip a small draught of watered wine or warm ale, just enough to shake off sleep's heaviness. Breakfast will come later, but first, there is the solemn pull of prayer. As you finish dressing, a maid smooths your hair beneath a lion veil, and you step toward the small chamber or oratory waiting nearby. The morning is young, and already you sense that your life, though cushioned in velvet and gold, is bound by rhythms older and heavier than you. You don't linger in bed, because to linger is to invite gossip, and in this court, gossip is more dangerous than frostbite. So you rise, you breathe the chill, and you begin the day. The chambermaids step back as you glide from your sleeping room into a smaller adjoining space. This is not the great cathedral of the kingdom, with stained glass towering like jewels. This is your private chapel, a place set aside for the quiet duty of prayer before the day unfurls. You walk slowly, skirts brushing the stone floor, and the scent of beeswax candles already lingers here. You kneel on the cushioned stool, the fabric worn from daily use, and you bow your head. In these hushed moments, the castle feels pause. You whisper late in words half memorized, half mumbled, and you feel the rhythm of the chants echo against the walls. The servants wait discreetly at the back, not daring to speak until you rise. The morning prayers anchor you, but they are also a performance of devotion, a reminder to any who watch that a royal woman is as much a guardian of piety as of bloodlines. Historians still argue whether queens and princesses truly believed every word, or whether prayer was more political than personal. The truth is, perhaps, that both can live in one heart. You need the comfort of faith, but you also know that being seen as devout grants you authority. The routine often includes the reading of a psalm, sometimes out loud, sometimes whispered. A confessor or chaplain may join you, reminding you gently of sins, even if yesterday's sins were nothing more scandalous than snapping at a maid for tugging your veil too tightly. He speaks of humility, but you can't help thinking that his own belly is rounder than your husband's treasury. You hide a smile, because jesting in prayer would never do. Once the candles burn low, you rise, and the servants adjust your veil. Now comes the lighter side of the ritual, breakfast. But not quite the feasts you might imagine. The meal is humble bread, sometimes still warm from the bakehouse, and a dish of honey or soft cheese. If fortune favors, there is fruit preserved in syrup or a small slice of smoked fish. The table is not crowded, only a few attendants hover nearby, ensuring your goblet stays filled. You sip ale, or watered wine, because water alone is far too risky. You chew slowly, thinking through the day's tasks, and occasionally you tease your mate about sneaking on with her finger when she thinks you're not looking. It is during this quiet meal that you notice how the castle stirs awake. From the window you glimpse servants carrying firewood, boys running to fetch water, dogs chasing each other in the courtyard. You hear the faint clanging of the blacksmith's hammer, the bleating of sheep being led out to graze. This symphony of labor is your background music, while you, sitting at a small table, plan what must be accomplished before nightfall. A quirky little tradition lingers, too. Some royal women believe the first bite of bread should be offered to the Virgin Mary, setting aside a morsel on the chapel altar. Others kept the crumb for themselves but whispered a prayer of thanks as though it were an offering. You find yourself torn between piety and hunger depending on how generous the cook has been with the honey pot. And in truth, breakfast is more than nourishment, it is a gathering of thoughts. Your mind turns to the letters that must be answered, the embroidery still half done, the steward's report on the grain harvest. You may not hold the crown on your head, but your hands steer the daily rhythm of the household. By the time the last crumb is gone, you feel steadier. The prayers have soothed you, the food has warmed you, and now the day stretches ahead like a tapestry waiting to be stitched. You push back the chair, adjust your gown, and rise. The maids fall into step as you return to your chamber. Soon the ritual of grooming begins, and with it, another stage of the endless performance of royal life. You return to your chamber, where the morning light now slants through narrow windows, pale and a little unforgiving. It is time for grooming, less glamorous than poetry makes it sound, but no less important to the image you project. A royal woman is expected to shine like polished brass, even if the castle air smells faintly of smoke and damp wool. The attendants bring forward a carved wooden chest, filled with combs of bone and ivory, small jars of ointment, and lengths of ribbon. A maid dips her hands into a basin of warm water infused with herbs, rose petals if the gardens have been generous, lavender sprigs if the apothecary had foresight. She squeezes a cloth and gently wipes your face, and you sigh, because for one brief moment, it feels almost like a luxury spam as the echoing chamber pots down the corridor. Your hair is untied, spilling heavy down your back. Grooming it is no small feat. Hours may be spent with comb and oil, drawing out tangles from sleep. Historians still argue whether noble women truly washed their hair as often as some chronicles suggest, or whether they relied more on scented waters and powders to disguise the truth. Either way, today it is brushed until it shines, and a dab of rose water is smoothed along the parting, its scent lingering like a secret garden tucked inside stone walls. The quirkier side of this ritual is less written about. Imagine the sudden yelp when a maid tugs too hard, and your half-genteel scold makes the entire chamber blush. Or the laughter when your lapdog darts forward, snatching a fallen ribbon as if it were a prize from heaven. In that laughter, you glimpse the humanity behind the formality, women jiggling over hairpins, not just titles and crowns. Next comes skin care, medieval edition. Small pots of ointment are produced, some made of beeswax mixed with herbs, others suspiciously shiny with animal fat. You dab at your cheeks, hoping for softness. A maid suggests egg whites to tighten the skin, another swears by ground almonds. You humor them both, because their pride in these concoctions is as strong as any apothecary's. And, truth be told, the egg white mask leaves you looking faintly ghost-like, enough to spook an unwary servant. Then, the dressing continues. A fresh chemise, smooth and clean, slips over your shoulders. Layer upon layer follows gown, surcoat, perhaps a fur-lined mantle if the season demands. A belt cinches the waist, its buckle gleaming. Jewelry is chosen carefully, not too much for morning duties, but enough to remind anyone watching that wealth and authority flow through your veins. As the veil is pinned, framing your face, you catch your reflection in a polished metal mirror. It is warped, imperfect, but it tells you enough. You look prepared. Not radiant, not flawless, but composed. And in court, composure is its own kind of armor. By now the morning has stretched on, and you are restless. The combing, the oils, the endless fussing over fabrics, it is necessary, but it is also tedious. You make a small joke about needing a second breakfast after surviving such torture, and the maids laugh. They know that their lady's wit keeps the routine bearable. When you finally rise from the stool, the gown flowing neatly, the veil crisp, you are not merely dressed. You are transformed into the symbol expected of you, graceful, pious, untouchable. Yet beneath the layers, you remain simply yourself, a woman who has endured yet another long session of combing, with the faint scent of rosewater clinging stubbornly to your hair. The castle hums louder now, and you step into the rhythm by taking your place at the morning table for breakfast proper. It is not the banquet one might imagine when thinking of kings and queens. It is simpler, quieter, though no less deliberate. Servants bring in trenchers of coarse bread, still warm from the ovens, their crusts browned and fragrant. A pot of honey glows golden in the light, thick and sticky, and you spoon just enough to sweeten the first bite. A small wheel of cheese is sliced, its rind leathery but the inside soft and tangy. If fortune smiles, There may be a dish of apples stewed with spices or a slice of cured fish from last night's stores. You eat slowly, savoring each taste, because meals are not only about nourishment but pacing. Too much honey too fast, and you'll be drowsy before midday duties begin. Historians still argue whether noble households truly consumed meat daily at breakfast, or whether that detail was exaggerated by chroniclers eager to praise abundance. In truth, much depended on the season, the trade routes, and whether the royal purse was flush or strained. This morning, you sip from a goblet of watered wine. Water on its own is risky. Rivers near towns flow with more refuse than purity, so all or wine diluted to softness is the safer path. You lift the goblet slowly, the cool metal pressing against your lips, and you wonder if your grandmother drank the same way decades ago, sitting in some equally drafty chamber. Meals also carried tiny customs. Some women insisted on cutting the first slice of bread crosswise, carving a little sign of the cross into the crust, before eating. Others kept a crust aside for beggars who might wait at the castle gate. You keep this practice too, slipping a portion into a servant's hands, knowing it will reach someone hungrier than you. Conversation at breakfast is gentle, but it can never be entirely private. Servants hover with jugs, wiping spills, replacing platters. They hear everything. You might whisper a joke to your companion, a little complaint about how stale the cheese tastes today, but by afternoon, the story may grow wings in the corridors. You learn to weigh every word. A royal woman eats not just with her mouth, but with caution. Still, you find your joys. The way butter melts onto warm bread, the way a bite of honey sticks to your finger so stubbornly you have no choice but to lick it clean and laugh at yourself. The way your lapdog paws at your skirts, hoping for a crumb, until you finally relent. These are the quiet, human pieces of your day, hidden beneath layers of expectation. When the last morsel is gone, you dab your lips with a cloth and rise. The servants rush to clear the table, scraping leftovers into baskets for others in the household. Breakfast has been modest, but it has served its purpose, to steady you, to remind you that even royalty begins with bread. You push back your chair and smooth your gown, already sensing the weight of what comes next. The meal is done, but the household awaits. Staff to manage, supplies to tally, disputes to untangle. You step away from the table, already shifting from woman to ruler of the domestic sphere. The date is ready to begin in earnest. You step from the breakfast table into the cellar, the warmest working room you can claim, and the day takes its managerial shape. The steward is already waiting, parchment roll in hand, ink drying in neat brown strokes. He bows, and you sit, your keys chiming softly at your belt like a small wind bell announcing that order is in session. Those keys matter, the spice cupboard, the lion chests, the closet where medicine sit in stoppered glass, all symbolically and sometimes literally under your keeping. You joke that if you ever fell into the moat, you would sink from the weight of those keys alone. The steward smiles as though this is funny every time. It is, in a castle where humor greases the gears of duty. You review the household list. The butler minding casks of wine and ale in the buttery, the pantler counting loaves in the pantry. Panis means bread, simple, practical laden that rides your day like a quiet lesson. The cook reigns in the kitchens, with scullions, spit boys, and pastry hands. The chamberlain coordinates rooms and bedding. Laundresses tackle mountains of linen. The almoner distributes bread to the poor at the gate. A royal household is not a family so much as a small village. That is the plain, mainstream truth. The larger the rank, the broader the staff, the more your routine is. Management supply lines, discipline, ritual. You listen while the steward reads stocks, how many ells of lion remain, how much salt is left in the barrel, whether beeswax candles must be ordered before the next vigil. Tallow smokes and smells, beeswax burns clean and sweet, and is fitting for chapel and company. Candle ends are saved in a jar, you resist calling it the jar of shame, to be remelted. The steward notes every stub. The cat, who believes itself comptroller of the realm, hops onto the table and sits squarely on the figures. You push it off gently, and it lands with the dignity of a minister dismissed. Spices come next, always under key: pepper, ginger, cinnamon, cloves, a precious pinch of saffron, sometimes sugar, more spice than staple in your century. You open the little chest, and the fragrance rushes out as if the Levant itself has exhaled. You ration carefully, because a handful of cloves can cost like small silver, and an overzealous cook can turn a stew into an audit. Historians still argue whether noble women personally unlocked these stores daily or whether trusted officers did so for them. Your practice sits comfortably between present for the important openings, delegating the humdrum. Then to linen. Linens are the pride and headache of any great house. Tablecloths, napery, sheets, toweling sittums, the chamberlains sign out and sign back in. You finger a hem where your own small initial is embroidered, a quiet deterrent to wandering textiles. Laundresses will boil and beat the cloth with lye water. More than one swears by a splash of stale urine to lift stubborn stains. Don't make that face. You tell yourself, it works. A quirky tidbit you secretly enjoy. A few ladies mark different sets of napkins for different days to catch pilferers who forget to return them. You resist turning it into a parlor game, but only barely. Deliveries arrive and you hear them before you see them, wheels rumbling, hooves on cobble, the porter calling down. From the gatehouse. You approve a cartload of firewood, tally sacks of grain, weigh cheese wheels, sniff ale. Yes, sniff, sour all can sink morale faster than a rainy feast day. You once joked that you could run a small monastery with what you spend on fuel. The steward pretended not to hear you, which is his art. Discipline is light but firm. A maid who wastes candlelight by gossiping after curfew loses her candle time for a week. A scullion who leaves the hearth unswept scrubs the stones again, this time under the watchful eye of the cat auditor. You lean more on habit than punishment. People work better when they know what tomorrow will look like. So you keep the rhythm steady: baking days, brewing days, market days, fish days for fasting, meat only when permitted. The church calendar shapes the menu like a steady drum. More than 100 days a year lean toward fish and vegetables. That fact, widely known, threads through every shopping list you will ever sign. The wardrobe clerk arrives with a roll of cloth and a small ledger. Wardrobe is not only gowns, it is textiles for your world coverlets, wall hangings, trimmings, even the green baize that muffles a chest lid. A seamstress shows you a torn sleeve from last night's chess hour. You smile at the memory of a too enthusiastic move and a snag on an armrest. Repairs are ordered. Another quiet victory for the doctrine of mending. You have learned to prefer darning to drama. You pause to hear petitions from staff. A cook asks for more almonds for Friday's pottage. The falconer begs a scrap allowance for the birds. The laundress requests vinegar for rinsing. You grant most, trim a few, and tuck away one small worry. Salt stores running low like a pebble in your shoe. Salt preserves fish, seasons everything, and signals wealth. Running out means more than bland soup. You make a note to send a letter to your factor about the next shipment. Amid the ledgers, a different kind of management whispers for your attention: charity. The almoner asks how much bread shall be given today. You decide on a generous basket. The harvest was good, thank heaven, and instruct that yesterday's trenchers from the great hall be cut and soaked for the infirm poor. You remember, with a wry smile, how you set aside that breakfast crust. The day has folded it back into a wider kindness. Governance begins with a loaf, then becomes a habit of the hand. There are always oddities on the books that make the day human. A line noting payment for mouse traps for the pantry. Another charging a fine for dripping lost, meaning kitchen fat unaccounted for. You tease the steward lightly that if he could inventory lather, he would. He replies, deadpan, that it would require a larger ledger. That earns your second real laugh of the morning. The first was when the cat stole the quill. Before you rise, you review the dinner plan. Remember, dinner is the midday feast, supper a lighter evening table. River fish if the weather holds, or a pork pie if the cook can spare a suit. A saffron-tinted custard may appear if eggs are plenty. You approve the order, and add one hopeful instruction. Keep back a dish for the infirmary, where the Castlesages and Fevers reside under the watch of a capable nurse. Finally, you stand, keys settling at your hip, and the steward bows out. This hour has not been glamorous, but it has been the spine of your day. Somewhere below, the great cauldrons begin to mutter, and the kitchens answer with the clang of ladles. You smooth your gown and think with a smile you keep to yourself that managing a royal household is half arithmetic, half lullaby. You tuck both into your voice as you turn toward the quieter, finer work that waits, the frame, the hoop, the colored threads, the patient world of needle and silk. The steward's ledgers are tucked away, the household wheels already spinning, and now you slip into a different rhythm and quieter, one more personal. The solar, brightened by a patch of sun that spills across the floor, has been ready. A frame stands waiting, stretched with linen. Colored threads gleam in a basket like a painter's palette, only softer. This is your embroidery hour, a time both leisurely and deeply symbolic. You settle into a high-backed chair, and the maids gather near, some with their own work, some simply to assist. You take the needle, dip it through the cloth, and pull the thread smooth. The first stitch is always grounding. It is not only pastime, it is duty. The tapestries and hangings of a household are living wall stories stitched in silk and wool, proclaiming lineage, faith, and fortune to every guest who sees them. Mainstream fact: royal women often spent long hours at embroidery, producing altar cloths, banners, and clothing embellishments. Some of the most exquisite needlework in medieval treasuries is attributed to queens and princesses, though sometimes their servants did the majority. Historians still argue whether noblewomen truly stitched every thread themselves or guided the designs, while skilled seamstresses did the heavy lifting. You know the truth lies somewhere between. You direct, you dabble, you contribute stitches that mark your hand in the cloth. Today, the project is a cushion cover for the chapel. Gold thread outlines a saint, while blues and greens swirl into leaves and flowers. Each stitch is deliberate, a tiny prayer embodied in silk. As the needle dips and rises, you find your breathing steadies. The castle noise dulls, replaced by the rhythm of thread passing through cloth. You joke, lightly, that this is your true exercise program: arm, wrist, repeat, no sweating required. The work has its quirks. Sometimes a maid brings thread dyed too unevenly, and you sigh as a line of petals fades awkwardly from crimson to salmon pink. Sometimes the cat, yes, the same self-important creature from the ledgers, leaps onto your lap, tangling the skein until everyone in the solar is laughing. And sometimes you prick your finger, proof that even queens bleed, and the tiniest dot of red appears on the cloth. A maid rushes for vinegar water, and you mutter that the stain will be your secret signature. Embroidery is also conversation. While the needle dips, you ask about a maid's family, or whether the new kitchen boy can truly sing, as rumor says. You listen to gossip, gentle or sharp, and filter it silently. Sometimes you feed the chatter back with a sly comment. One maid says the steward looks sour as a lemon. You reply that at least lemons are expensive, so he must be valuable. The room erupts in quiet jiggles. The larger meaning is not lost on you. Needlework is a visible reminder that women's influence lies not only in words but in fabric, in color, in objects that outlast their hands. Embroidered cloths hang in churches for decades, silent ambassadors of devotion. A gown you edge in pearls may be worn by your daughter at her wedding, carrying your stitches into another house. In these moments, your legacy runs in threads as much as in blood. As the hour stretches, the sunlight warms your lap, and the work becomes meditative. The motif grows, petals closing around a saint's face, gold shimmering in outlines. You allow your mind to wander, to replay the morning's accounts, to anticipate the visitors later. Yet still, the hand moves, stitch after stitch. Finally, you pause, leaning back. The piece has grown, though it is far from finished. You hand the frame to a waiting maid, who will keep the tension even until tomorrow. You rise, flexing your fingers, half amused that such delicate work can make your shoulders itch like a night after practice in the yard. Needlework has restored you, in its quiet way. It has reminded you that creation, however small, is as noble as command. You smooth your gown, straighten your veil, and prepare to step once again into the broader courtly stage where language and letters will claim the next piece of your day. The tapestry frame is set aside, the needle threaded neatly for another day, and now your mind turns toward words instead of stitches. Letters, lessons, and the quiet labor of literacy fill the next portion of your morning. A desk of carved oak waits by the window, where the light is strongest. A small inkwell of iron gull ink, sharp and black, sits beside a quill trimmed just so. Parchment is stacked carefully, each sheet expensive enough to make you think twice before blotting. You ease into the chair and adjust your veil. A royal woman is expected to be literate, at least enough to read prayers and correspondence, and sometimes much more. Some queens were fluent in Latin, French, and their native tongue, composing letters that survive to this day. Mainstream fact, Eleanor of Aquitaine and Blanche of Castile were both renowned for their sharp minds as well as their needlework. Historians still argue whether every noblewoman truly pursued language study, or whether chroniclers exaggerated their scholarship to flatter dynasties. The truth, as ever, lies somewhere between. Today, a letter from a cousin abroad awaits your reply. You dip the quill, the ink pooling dark, and you begin with the polite flourishes of greeting. Your handwriting is steady, though the quill splays occasionally, leaving a blot that makes you sigh. You joke, softly, that perhaps the ink itself holds grudges, and the maid jiggles behind her hand. The words flow, questions about health, tidings of children, a mention of the Saints' Day feast you just held. Diplomacy is sewn between the lines, alliances kept alive not only with marriages and treaties, but with warm, personal letters exchanged across borders. Between correspondence, you turn to a book of psalms, written in Latin. The letters shimmer in black and red ink, gilded initials shining like treasure. Reading aloud, you test your voice against the quiet, and a maid repeats the words after you. Teaching them a little Latin feels like sharing a secret. They grin, stumbling over declensions, and you praise their effort. It is both lesson and entertainment. A quirk of this routine, sometimes the parchment margins hold doodles from bored scribestiny rabbits, odd faces, even a knight fighting a snail. You pause to chuckle, showing the maids. Who knew medieval manuscripts could hide jokes? The servants laugh, and you muse aloud that perhaps even monks needed mischief between prayers. You also dictate. A clerk sits nearby, quill scratching, as you pace and speak. Instructions to your factor about the salt shipment, reminders to your cousin about her promised embroidery pattern, requests for more almonds from the market. You slip in one private note just about your lapdog's latest theft of bread, because even in politics, humor oils the gears. The room itself becomes a little schoolhouse. You recite a French phrase, once learned from a tutor years ago, and the maids repeat it with varying success. You tease one gently, telling her she just proposed to the wall instead of greeting it. Lather bubbles, breaking the stiffness of the lesson. For you, letters are more than ink, they are power. In a world where men rule armies, women rule networks of words. A single letter can carry warmth, warning, or wisdom. It can outlast your voice. You think of how, someday, someone might read your words centuries from now, and you hope they catch not only your intent but your humor. The hour winds. The ink dries, the parchments are sanded, the quills laid aside. You flex your fingers, stained faintly with black, and lean back. Language has filled your morning as much as bread or prayer. You have stitched your presence not only in cloth but in words. Outside the chamber, footsteps echo. Visitors are expected. The lessons of the morning fold neatly into the social duties of the afternoon, where conversation will carry as much weight as any letter sealed with wax. The parchments are stacked, the quills rinsed, and now you turn toward the part of the day that is both social and political, receiving visitors. A royal woman's chamber is not merely private, it is also a stage, and the solar or audience room becomes your theater. Servants arrange cushions and chairs, brushing away ash from the hearth, and soon you hear the murmur of footsteps in the corridor. The first guests are revenable women from neighboring manors, perhaps a visiting cousin, perhaps the wife of a local lord who has come to pay respects. Their gowns rustle as they enter, veils pinned with care, cheeks flushed from the cold outside. You rise and greet them with a smile that is both warm and measured, because every gesture carries meaning. Too stiff, and you seem distant, too casual, and you risk gossip. Mainstream fact: for royal women, audiences were a daily duty. They received not only friends but petitioners, emissaries, and sometimes even rival courtiers. A castle solar could serve as both drawing room and diplomatic chamber. Historians still argue whether these gatherings were mostly light-hearted companionship or serious political maneuvering dressed in silk. You know, of course, that they were both. Today's conversations float from topic to topic. A lady praises the tapestry you showed yesterday, another compliments the embroidery hoop resting in the corner. You speak of fabrics, spices, the upcoming feast day. But beneath these soft subjects, sharper currents run. How is her husband faring in his duties? Did she hear of the harvest in the south? Does she know whether the bishop plans to attend court at Easter? You smile, you nod, you listen, collecting threads of knowledge as carefully as you once collected threads of silk. Sometimes, the visitors bring tokens: a basket of pears wrapped in straw, a bolt of cloth dyed in a rare shade, a small carved relic said to have touched a saint's shrine. You accept them graciously, promising reciprocation when your turn comes. Gift-giving is as much diplomacy as any treaty. There are lighter moments, too. A lady confesses, jiggling, that her falcon refuses to fly and prefers to nap on the perch. You tease her that perhaps the bird simply admires her too much to leave her side. Laughter softens the room, a reminder that joy belongs even in a castle bound by protocol. Not every visitor is equal. Some are subtle spies, weighing your words, watching for hesitation. You remind yourself to steer carefully, to let humor cushion truth. You describe the weather at length: safe, neutral, and possible to twist into politics until the moment passes. One quirk of these afternoons: sometimes you hold mini courts of advice. A maid asks quietly about a suitor, a cousin wonders whether to allow her daughter to join a convent. You offer counsel, couched in gentle phrases, knowing full well that your opinion carries weight. You may not command armies, but you shape decisions whispered in corners, and those decisions ripple outward. As the afternoon deepens, musicians sometimes drift in, lute or harp softening the air. The talk continues over music, words weaving with melody. A platter of candied almonds or spiced wine might be offered, sweetening tongues and tempers alike. You nibble slowly, laughing that if almonds were counted like candles, your steward would surely faint. At last, the visitors take their leave, each curtsy a small ceremony. You watch them go, noting who lingered longer, who spoke more, who kept their eyes lowered. You file it all away. These afternoons may seem like pleasant chatter, but they are, in truth, the threads that stitch together the web of power. When the room empties, you exhale. The fire burns low, the cushions sag slightly, and you feel the weight of words spoken and unsaid. It has been a performance, yes, but also a reminder that your influence travels not by sword, but by conversation. Now the bell in the courtyard tolls the hour. Dinner in the great hall awaits, a change of pace and scene, where the theater of food and spectacle will take center stage. You smooth your gown, adjust your veil, and prepare to step into the next ritual of your day. The bell echoes across the courtyard, summoning everyone toward the day's great centerpiece, dinner. Remember, in medieval Europe, dinner means the main meal, served closer to midday than evening. You rise from your solar, attendants fluttering around to straighten your gown and ensure your veil lies just right. This is no private snack but a performance, a display of wealth, order, and hospitality. You step into the great hall. The air is heavy with wood smoke and the mingled scents of roasting meat, onions, and spiced sauces. Long trestle tables stretch down the hall, benches filled with household officers, visiting squires, and favored guests. At the high table, set upon a dais, your place awaits beside the king or lord. The walls glow with tapestries, not only to block drafts but also to remind all who enter of lineage, battles, saints, and triumphs. Mainstream fact: medieval royal dinners were rituals of hierarchy. Seating mattered as much as the food. Who sat close to you, who was placed further down, who was invited at all. A misplaced guest could spark gossip, or worse. Historians still argue whether every meal truly unfolded with strict ceremony or whether some days were looser, more like family gatherings. Today, you sense the weight of formality. You take your seat, a servant spreading a fine cloth before you. The table gleams with pewter dishes, salt cellars, and sometimes even a silver goblet if guests of rank are present. Trenchers thick slabs of stale bread serve as plates for meats and sauces. The first course arrives, perhaps pottage thick with barley and herbs, followed by roasted capon glazed with honey. A dish of peas and onions balances the heavier fare, and platters are carried in with solemn dignity. The steward of the pantry presents the bread, the butler pours wine, diluted just enough to last the meal. The carver steps forward, trained in the art of slicing meat with elegance. You watch his blade flash, neat as a dance. Even this practical act is theater, demonstrating discipline and refinement. Between courses, entertainment slips in. A boy with a lute plays softly at the side. A jester offers a quip that makes even the steward smile. You lean toward a guest, offering a gentle joke of your own, that the jester's wisdom might outshine the bishop's, at least today. The guest chuckles, lowering her goblet quickly before wine spills. Yet the meal is not only laughter. Diplomacy hums beneath the clatter of knives. A lord across the table mentions the grain harvest, testing whether your household fared better than his. Another asks if you have received word from a neighboring court. You answer carefully, smiling, words measured as surely as the carver's slices. Bread and meat may feed bodies, but conversation here feeds politics. Porky tidbit, dishes were often spiced so heavily that the flavors might surprise a modern tongue. A sweet custard could contain pepper, a fish pie might hide raisins. You take a spoonful of a golden sauce bright with saffron, and think how odd it is that such strange mixtures now taste familiar. You tease that the cook must be an alchemist, turning pantry odds and ends into something almost magical. The hall hums louder as the second course arrives, perhaps venison with thick gravy, or a pie shaped like a castle itself, pastry walls rising in edible grandeur. Sometimes, cooks slip live birds into hollow pies for spectacle, though today's kitchen wisely spares you the chaos of wings in the rafters. Instead, you enjoy marchpane sweets, almonds ground with sugar into delicate shapes. You laugh softly when one maid sneaks a fragment, eyes wide with guilty delight. At the close, grace is said, and the meal begins to dissolve. The trenchers, soaked with sauces, are gathered. Some will be fed to the dogs, others, as custom dictates, are sent out as alms to the poor waiting at the gates. It comforts you that even in this spectacle, some nourishment flows outward. You rise from the high table, your movements echoed by others down the hall. The meal has been both duty and pleasure, a reminder that every bite in royal company is part of a greater performance. The hall quiets, servants sweeping crumbs, dogs sniffing under benches, the jester bowing low as though the play has ended. The sunlight outside still slants high. Afternoon is young. You step from the hall, belly warmed, mind still alert, and you feel the pull of gardens and air, a different stage entirely. The stone walls have held you long enough, now the green world calls, promising an hour of peace before the next duty begins. The meal's warmth lingers in your belly as you step away from the hall and toward the castle gardens. After hours indoor, stone walls, smoky hearths, crowded tables, the thought of sunlight feels like a small salvation. You gather your mantle, gesture for a maid or two to follow, and descend into the green. The gardens are no wild forests but carefully arranged spaces, half practical, half beautiful. Square beds of herbs line the paths, sage, thyme, rosemary, and mint. Their fragrance rises as you brush past, each plant as valuable for medicine as for flavor. A patch of lavender nods in the breeze, stalks gathered later for sachets to sweeten lion chests. Mainstream fact, medieval noble gardens combined utility and leisure, herbs for the kitchen, simples for the apothecary, flowers for devotion, and shaded bowers for rest. Historians still argue whether royal women spent hours actively tending these plants or whether they only strolled among them, while gardeners did the real work. In truth, you find yourself doing both. Today you stoop and pinch a sprig of mint, rubbing it between your fingers, inhaling the sharp green scent, while a gardener bows and waits to hear if you approve his work. You stroll further, skirts swishing softly along gravel paths. In a corner, falcons perch hooded, their sharp eyes hidden beneath leather caps. The falconer greets you, offering one bird for your arm. You laugh lightly, confessing that the bird is far better at flying than you are at keeping a glove steady. Still, you extend your arm, feeling the surprising weight, the talons gripping leather. The moment is both thrilling and humbling, a reminder that the grace of flight rests on your wrist only by training and trust. The gardens hold quirks, too. A rabbit scampers through the herb bed, chased by a hound, sending servants shrieking and laughing in pursuit. A fountain burbles in the center, where children of the household sometimes toss stones to see whose splash is tallest. You pause to watch fish dart beneath the ripples, their golden scales flashing. You joke to a maid that at least the fish never complain about their diet, unlike half the kitchen staff. You take a seat in a shaded arbor, vines climbing around its wooden frame, blossoms nodding above. Here, the air feels softer, scented with roses. The garden is a rare space of relative privacy, where you can breathe without the press of stone or the endless echo of obligation. You ask for a psalm to be read aloud, and a maid obliges, her voice carrying gently over bird song. The verses weave with the rustle of leaves, and you close your eyes for a moment, content. Gardens also serve as quiet stages for conversation. A cousin leans close, asking in hushed tones whether her son might be considered for a post in your household. You murmur polite interest, neither committing nor refusing. In these walks, alliances are whispered, favors hinted at, debts remembered. Every rosebush hides a politics of its own. The sun edges west, shadows stretching longer, and you know the leisure must end soon. Still, you allow yourself a last moment stooping to gather a rosebud, careful of thorns. You hand it to a maid, who blushes at the unexpected gift. You smile, amused, whispering that even roses are easier to manage than certain noblemen. The joke ripples into soft laughter, easing the walk back. The castle rises again ahead of you, stone walls casting cool shadows. The gardens have steadied you, restored a measure of calm. But duty calls again, religion, charity, the expectation that your station is not for yourself alone. You turn toward the chapel, prepared to fold the peace of the garden into the solemnity of prayer and giving. The quiet fragrance of roses clings to your gown as you re-enter the castle, but the mood shifts quickly. Gardens belong to leisure, the chapel belongs to duty. You step into the dim light, where candles flicker in iron sconces and incense lingers faintly in the air. A crucifix glimmers above the altar, and your knees bend almost instinctively. This rhythm of devotion is constant in your life. Royal women are expected not only to pray, but to be seen praying, visible symbols of piety for all who serve and visit. Mainstream fact, queens and noble ladies often acted as patrons of monasteries, convents, and parish churches. They endowed chapels, sponsored relics, and distributed alms as tangible proof of faith. Historians still argue whether such generosity stemmed from pure devotion or calculated politics. You know, of course, that faith and politics rarely traveled separate roads. You whisper the familiar prayers, words flowing like a second heartbeat. The beads of a rosary slip through your fingers, smooth with long use. The chapel is never entirely silent. Servants shuffle, a candle sputters, but the stillness within you is real. You bow your head, half in devotion, half in exhaustion, knowing that both kinds of bow are acceptable to God. Then comes the duty of charity. The almoner stands ready with baskets of bread and trenchers left from dinner. You instruct him to distribute them at the gate, to those who wait shivering in the cold. Sometimes you go yourself, standing behind a wooden screen so that the poor may take food without crowding too near. Today, you decide to watch quietly from a gallery above the courtyard. You see hands stretch upward, hear voices murmur blessings, and you feel a mix of humility and relief. Even stale bread becomes a kind of sacrament when hunger is sharp. There are quirks in this giving, too. Children sometimes linger, hoping for not only bread but a smile. You toss down an apple once, laughing at the scramble, and your confessor scolded you afterward for turning charity into sport. You apologized politely but still remember the sparkle in that child's eyes. Perhaps joy is its own form of almsgiving. Back in the chapel, the priest mutters about indulgences, about offerings for souls. You half listen, nodding, knowing that coins given today may fund prayers long after you are gone. It is a strange thought that piety can be purchased like spices, but it comforts many. And who are you to unravel comfort? A maid kneels beside you, whispering that her brother lies sick in the village. You promise to send a small jar of honey and herbs. For her, that promise is as precious as any gilded reliquary. You remind yourself that charity is not only for the poor at the gate, but for those who serve under your roof every day. The chapel grows warmer with candlelight, shadows stretching as the sun lowers outside. You make the sign of the cross, rise, and let the priest close his book. Piety has been performed, generosity dispensed, and yet a kernel of something softer remains, faith not as politics, but as breath. As you step back into the corridor, the castle feels changed again. Evening approaches, and with it a lighter mood. Entertainments await: music, poetry, and laughter. You allow yourself to smile, thinking that after a day of bread, needles, and prayers, a little song will do the soul good. Evening settles like velvet over stone, and with it your day opens into its gentler hour. The great hall is too grand for private amusements, so you choose a smaller chamber where the hearth can whisper instead of roar. Beeswax candles bloom along a wall shelf, their light soft and honey-colored, and the room seems to exhale. Your keys chime faintly at your belt as you enter, proof that even leisure arrives under quiet command. Musicians are already waiting. A harper tunes, the strings rising and falling like the breath of a sleepy child. A viol player tests a long, melancholy note, a small drum tabarists ready for a sprightly rhythm if the mood requires it. You thank them with a nod and take your seat on a cushioned chair, motioning for close friends and favored ladies to settle near. The cat naturally arrives as if invited, curls on the warm flagstones, and pretends total indifference to art. The first tune is gentle, the kind that smooths the day's edges. You let your shoulders drop, feeling the melody unknot the minutes that ledgered themselves across your morning. Mainstream fact, music-filled. Medieval courts, nightly harps, fiddles, flutes, and voices sharing romances, saints' lives, and dance tunes. Among the nobility, familiarity with such entertainments was considered part of good breeding. You close your eyes and follow the song's story, a night delayed by snow, a prayer at a roadside shrine, a candle that would not die in the wind. Is it a miracle or a clever lantern? You decide it can be both, because bedtime is an ideal place for mercies large and small. Between songs, you turn the evening toward play. A servant sets out a chessboard, its pieces carved from bone and dark wood, kings wearing tiny crowns, knights frozen mid-gallop. You invite an old friend to sit opposite you. Fair warning, you say with a smile, my bishop occasionally wanders like an absent-minded confessor. She laughs, counters that her rook prefers dramatic exits, and the game begins, a ritual of concentration disguised as entertainment. Your hand moves a pawn, her fingers hover over a knight. You savor the soft clack of pieces on the board, the way strategy makes its own music under the harper's line. Historians still argue whether noble women commonly played chess themselves or mostly watched their husbands and brothers compete. You, for one, enjoy the game too much to yield the board. A little wood in the evening harms no one unless it costs you your queen. The musicians shift to a livelier air, and a pair of young pages attempt a careful step or two, trying to be graceful without dropping the pillar candles they've been told to hold. You hide a grin. The tabbers beat doodles in the corners of the room, someone hums, a maid can't help adding a harmony. It is astonishing how quickly a castle, which spent all day proving its seriousness, can break into happiness with the nudge of a drum. A jester arrives, hat bells subdued out of respect for your quiet chamber. He bows, eyes bright with the dangerous kindness of the licensed fool. His jokes are soft tonight, gentle prods at the steward's obsession with candle stubs, a story about the falcon who prefers naps to flight, a rhymed couplet about a certain lapdog who considers stolen bread a divine right. You lift an eyebrow at that and confess that the dog has also stolen hearts. The room laughs, and the jester bows as if praised by a bishop. Humor, you think, is a second kind of charity given freely, warming as surely as bread. Refreshments arrive, spiced wine modestly warmed, a dish of candied almonds you ask the cook to hide from the steward's ledger for this hour alone. You pretend not to notice how quickly the bowl shrinks when you pass it near the musicians. A small platter holds wafers perfumed with rosewater, and you take one, smiling at the echo of your morning's scent. If you taste a garden, you say, give thanks to the laundress who keeps the linens sweet enough to envy. Your ladies jiggle, the cat opens one eye, unimpressed with social commentary. Porky tidbit, some courts delighted in. Curious entertainments at this hour, little games with forfeit kisses, carved puzzle nuts that opened into nested compartments, even the occasional appearance of a hurdy-gurdy whose droning, be-like song could set the whole room swing. Tonight a page brings one of those trick walnuts, and you pass it around, watching every face brighten when the third tiny lid finally pops free. It is a small, ridiculous victory, and therefore perfect. Between moves, the conversation becomes the soft web that always spins in evening safety. A cousin quotes a line from a romance, and you answer with another, then undercut it with a tiny jokies, yes, undying love, but who's washing the hero's socks? Your ladies laugh loudly enough that the harper nearly misses a note. You lift a hand in apology and promise him an extra sugared fig tomorrow. He forgives you on the spot. Figs conquer all. You win your chess game with a bishop's sly slide that even surprises you. Your friend claps her hands, demanding revenge tomorrow. You promise it, because promises of play are a pleasant kind of debt. Then you exchange the board for a set of tablets, a game future centuries will call backgammon and let others try their luck. Dice rattle in a wooden cup, but you impose a rule of modest stakes, only compliments owed, never coins. The jester groans that compliments are far more expensive, and you decree that he must pay too immediately. He does, with flowery exaggeration, and the room folds in laughter once more. Near the end of the hour, you ask for a final song. Something slow, you request, a melody that carries the day toward rest. The harper chooses a hem-shaped tune, the veil weaves a second voice, and the words drift like candle smoke, mercy, patience, home. Your gaze slips to the window slit, where a ribbon of night has already tied itself across the sky. For a moment you remember the poor at the gate receiving trenchers, the garden's rose given to a blushing maid, the morning's egg-white mask that made a noble ghost of you, the cat seated on the steward's accounts as if to keep the realm from overspending on fun. Your day is a string of small scenes, and evening gathers them into a pearl. When the last note fades, everyone waits, as if not to frighten away the quiet. You thank the musicians, praise a maid's harmony, pat the cat who pretends you are interrupting important thinking, and rise. It has been a soft hour, made of song, clever fingers, and curved laughter. It has also been a kind of governance of mood, of memory, of the stories people will tell themselves as they climb to their beds. You step into the corridor, where the air is cooler and the candles burn lower. Night calls you toward the chambers where privacy returns and the world narrows to you, your thoughts, and a final prayer. But you carry this evening with you the harper's line, the chessboard's patient geometry, the jester's brave kindness like warmth cupped in both hands. The laughter from the evening chamber lingers in your ears as you return to your private rooms, but the shift is immediate. Entertainment has its charms, now the air thickens with the quieter, heavier weight of politics. For a royal woman, The heart of power often beats not in throne rooms but in hushed conversations, in marriage plans, and letters sealed with wax. You seat yourself by the hearth. The steward has left a packet of correspondence on a small table, folded parchments, red seals, neat handwriting. A maid places a cup of warm spiced wine at your elbow, as though she knows you will need the comfort. You take one letter, break the seal, and begin. Mainstream fact: royal women were deeply involved in marriage negotiations, both their own and those of their children, siblings, and extended kin. Alliances were currency, and each match could shift the balance of power between kingdoms. Historians still argue whether queens wielded true decision-making power or served more as messengers of their husband's will. Yet your lived truth is that you are expected to advise, persuade, and sometimes scheme. Tonight's letters speak of matches. A cousin's daughter is of age, and whispers of suitors arrive from two courts. One brings wealth but questionable bloodlines, the other has noble ancestry but empty coffers. You smile wryly. Why do they never send you candidates with both? You mutter to the maid that perhaps you should demand a dowry paid in patience instead of gold. She stifles a laugh. Another letter carries subtler news, rumors of unrest near a border. Not rebellion yet, but the sort of murmuring that can sour into conflict. You fold the parchment slowly, weighing whether this will affect your children's future marriages. You realize again how politics and motherhood are intertwined, each decision echoing through family and kingdom alike. You remember your own marriage, how it was spoken of long before you were old enough to understand it. You recall the first meeting with your husband, the nerves hidden beneath layers of silk. You recall, too, the advice whispered by your mother: be steady, be pleasant, but never forget that your silence is power. Speak when you choose, not when they expect it. That counsel has shaped every negotiation since. Porky tidbit: sometimes matches were planned even before the children involved could walk. Cradles rocked with futures already tied by ink. You picture two babies swaddled, one already promised to the other, and you can't resist joking that at least they will never quarrel over who forgot an anniversary. The humor is thin, but reality keeps you sane in the face of contracts written before childhood ends. Tonight, you draft a careful reply to one of the letters. You praise the suitor's lineage but mention politely that a more generous dowry would demonstrate earnest intent. Your quill scratches steady, the ink drying quickly. You think of the girl in question, perhaps dreaming of a romance that will never come. You feel both protective and wary. The chronicles may one day call her fortunate, but you know the truth will be more complicated. Marriage and heirs, these are the engines of dynasties. Every union is a gamble, every child a hope. And you, with your letters and your listening, are both player and referee. The irony is sharp: you hold power in negotiations, yet your own life was once a piece moved on the same board. You set the quill down, flexing fingers stiff with ink. The parchments are stacked, the seals cooling. The fire pops in the hearth, and you lean back, feeling both the satisfaction of duty done and the weight of choices still unresolved. The chamber is quiet now. Outside, the night deepens, the stars wheel. You exhale, letting the wine's warmth soften the edge of calculation. There will always be more letters, more matches, more hairs. But for this moment, you allow yourself to rest not as a negotiator or a matriarch, but simply as a woman, wary of politics yet bound to it as surely as silk to thread. The fire settles into a soft glow, embers pulsing like a heartbeat. For the first time today, the bustle thins, the doors stay closed, and you find yourself in the rarest of possessions, a private hour. These are the moments that do not make it into chronicles or illuminated manuscripts, yet they may be the truest part of a royal woman's life. You sit near the hearth, gown loosened slightly, veil set aside. The air against your hair feels almost scandalously free. On the table lies a small box of letters, not the official kind with seals and signatures, but personal scraps, notes from family, fragments of poetry copied by a friend, a child's drawing on rough parchment. You lift one gently and smile, remembering. Mainstream fact: royal women often wrote or received letters that were never meant for archives, personal confessions, spiritual musings, even love notes. Historians still argue whether such private words survived in secret or were destroyed deliberately. The truth is simple: secrecy was as much survival as privacy. You dip your quill in ink, but instead of another political missive, you allow yourself a different sort of writing. Perhaps it is a diary entry, perhaps a letter you will never send. You write of the garden rosebud you gave to a maid, of the tune the harper played tonight, of the way your lapdog curled in your skirts during prayers. These are not state matters, but they are your life, and setting them on parchment feels like claiming them. Sometimes, in these hours, longing stirs. You think of family far away, or of a youthful friendship that faded into duty. You remember laughter in a garden years ago, before politics claimed every smile. You wonder quietly, dangerously, if happiness might have looked different had choices been yours alone. Then you chide yourself with gentle sarcasm, and perhaps pigs would sprout wings and deliver supper on trays. The thought makes you laugh loud, startling the maid who dozed in the corner. You reassure her, and the moment passes, softened by humor. Porky tidbit: some noble women are said to have hidden messages in embroidery itself, stitching initials or secret patterns into borders. You glance at your own unfinished tapestry and wonder whether future eyes will ever notice the tiny cross you worked into the hem, not as devotion, but as a wink to yourself. Maybe that is your own rebellion, quiet, invisible, yet enduring. You lean back, stretching fingers cramped from writing. The chamber is hushed except for the crackle of fire and the faint hoot of an owl outside. The stillness invites thought, not only of longing but of gratitude. For your children, for the servants who make your life possible, even for the stern steward whose ledger keeps the household upright. Gratitude, too, for moments like this when the weight of crowns and treaties fades and you are simply yourself. A final glance into the fire shows shapes dancing in the coals. You imagine them as small stories, knights, saints, jesters all flickering and vanishing in the glow. You smile softly, deciding that even fire tells tales when given time. The hour draws late. You tuck the unsent letter into the small box, close the lid, and slip it into the chest beneath your bed. It will remain there, unseen, yet carrying pieces of you that no chronicle will ever capture. Tomorrow will bring more letters, more politics, more spectacles. But tonight, you have written your own truth, however small. You rise, smoothing your gown, and prepare for the final act of the day, the retreat into sleep, where velvet curtains and whispered prayers carry you into night's embrace. Night gathers thickly around the castle, the kind of night where torches sputter in the corridors, and the air tastes faintly of smoke and damp stone. You retreat toward your chambers, steps slower now, your body heavy with the long rhythm of the day. Servants pad softly at your side, carrying small bundles, a ewer of water, a candle stub, a warming pan filled with coals to chase the chill from your bed. The bed itself is more fortress than nest. A heavy wooden frame, draped with curtains of wool or velvet, looms in the dimness. The curtains are practical as well as grand. They trap heat, they block drafts, they create a little world apart from the echoing hall. Tonight they are drawn back, waiting for you like a small stage awaiting its star. Before retiring, there is ritual still. You kneel briefly at the foot of the bed, whispering prayers for protection through the night. Mainstream fact. Medieval women ended the day with devotion, reciting prayers to the Virgin or to favorite saints. Historians still argue whether every noble lady knelt nightly, or whether some left the words to priests and chaplains. Yet you feel the act grounding, a pause between day's duty and night's surrender. The maids untie the laces of your gown, layer by layer, until the weight slips from your shoulders. You exhale, feeling lighter, almost yourself again. A lion shift remains, soft and plain. The warming pan has done its work. When you slip between sheets, the chill does not bite as cruelly. You murmur a jest that the bed feels warmer than your husband ever manages, and the maids jiggle before quickly schooling their faces. Humor is allowed, but only in safe corners. Porky tidbit, some women tucked small charms or relics beneath their pillow, sprigs of rosemary for protection, a saint's medallion, even a scrap of parchment with a verse. You keep a tiny carved cross hidden in the corner of your bed frame, not because you believe it holds magic, but because it reminds you that faith belongs not only in chapels, but in moments of solitude. The chamber dims further as candles are snuffed. Shadows climb the walls, then dissolve into the folds of the curtains. You settle onto the mattress stuffed with straw and wool, listening as the castle itself seems to sigh into silence. From the courtyard comes the muffled call of a watchman, the faint jingle of a dog's chain, the rustle of wind against shutters. These sounds become a lullaby of stone and night. You close your eyes, feeling the day gather behind you like a tapestry, prayers in the chapel, bread at the table, needles biting cloth, letters scratched in ink, conversations like threads woven through hours. Each moment has been duty, but also life, messy, funny, heavy, soft. You smile faintly at the memory of the cat sitting on the steward's ledger, and the smile carries you toward sleep. The curtain is drawn, the chamber fades, and you drift into the dark, knowing that tomorrow will begin again with cold air, warm bread, and the endless dance of being both woman and emblem. For now, though, you rest wrapped in linen, shadow, and the gentle promise of dreams. You lie still and let the hush of the castle gather around you. The embers breathe their soft red, and the night air folds itself into gentler shapes. You feel your heart beat slow, like oars dipping evenly across a moonlit lake. In the quiet, the day loosens its knots, threads slipping free, one by one. You picture the chapel's candle flame, steady as a star. You picture the garden path where might brightened your hands, and the rosebud you pressed into a maid's palm. You picture the chessboard waiting patiently for tomorrow, and the cat seated on the steward's ledger as if guarding your ladder for safe keeping. Each image grows smaller, lighter, like snowflakes drifting past a warm window. You breathe in. You breathe out. The bed holds you kindly. Lion cools your skin, the curtain cradles the air. Far below, a watchman calls the hour fainter, fainter until even duty sounds sleepy. If a stray thought tugs your sleeve, you nod to it, then let it walk the corridor by itself while you stay wrapped in quiet. The day's sounds soften into lullaby notes, a log settling in the hearth, a dog's collar chiming once, the hush between two footsteps. Bread and needles, letters and songs, all of it settles into a safe, even shadow. The worries shrink to the size of buttons, the hopes glow like pearls cupped in your hand. You keep only what is light enough to float. You are warm. You are safe. You are more than emblem and more than duty. You are a gentle heart at rest. Let the chamber grow dim. Let the story close its eyes. Sleep finds you the way dawn finds a shutter's edge quietly, tenderly, without hurry. Hush now. Drift.